Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and I was thinking, wow, I actually agree with the Smogon decision. Almost. That it was so close. It was so close for me to be like, yeah, that was actually a good idea. And yet, it just didn't happen. So,
And here we are again. So this is the first time in a while that Verlis has made a video about anything related to Smogon, or at least that I've heard of. I've already watched this video one time through, and I gotta say, I don't think it's as bad as the last one, but there's still a lot of things that are just kind of irrelevant to this whole banning process that he tries to point out as evidence, and then some things that he just gets flat out wrong. So, just like the last time, I'm going to be pointing those things out as he talks in this video.
for those of you guys that don't know, if you're playing the unofficial Smogon metagame, Landorus has recently been banned. And at first when I heard it, I heard the suspect test, I was like, Landorus is being suspected? Thank you, finally! I think that actually makes sense, because Landorus Therian has had it too good for two. They banned Landorus Incarnate.
Yeah, show force Landorus Incarnate with like a fuck trillion base power move that's stab. It's like one of the best offensive moves in the game. But I think I'll be able to explain why. I just don't think Verlis understands. I don't think Verlis has a lot of experience using or playing against Landorus, certainly not at a high level. And because, he described himself as a big VGC player, right? Went 0-4 to regionals and then dropped out, but whatever. So he's mostly running into the Landorus theory and things, Landorus-I is not as popular in doubles. So I think that's one of the main issues here and why this is so confusing to him. Which, I kind of understand that perspective. If I didn't play Smogon myself and I was looking at this from the outside, but then he just tries to talk about it like he's an expert and he gets a whole bunch of things wrong. So we'll keep going.
Wait, what? That's what I don't get. That Smogon was so close to making the right decision. That Landorus Therian.
But Landorus Therian is not broken in the Smogon
metagame. Of a
metagame.
toxic Pokemon to the metagame than just Landorus Incarnate. And I've been going through and looking at all the things. So here's the thing: Landorus should be banned and blah blah blah. And then this
By a
is
75% supermajority,
weaknesses and people talking
which he
about
doesn't
it.
mention, by the way.
As you can see here, my research has been fairly plentiful. I've been going through and reading it. But overall, Landorus is not a Pokemon that really has given me problems, mostly because it runs sheer force.
The problem with his so-called research, as we're going to see later, is that it's very superficial and doesn't really tell us anything about the effectiveness of the Pokemon.
Force and Life Orb, so any Pokemon over 101 base speed is going to just destroy it, and it's also really only a Pokemon that's very strong in a check situation, that you have to knock out an opponent's Pokemon, then they bring in the Landorus, and then you're put in a very...
I think you kind of underestimate Landorus' defensive stats, and the fact that it has such a great immunity in, immunity to ground, and another immunity to electric makes it even sweeter, and it has just enough bulk to live the most common HP ices. So I mean, it's not like Greninja where it's a complete glass cannon. Sure, it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, but it can take a hit for sure. And I think you're overestimating the amount of things that can actually outspeed Landorus and threaten it at the same time.
very awkward situation to where you might have to sack or something like that, but you already have the advantage by that point. And you also have a lot of Pokemon that can stop Landorus. It isn't one of those Pokemon that has no counters. It isn't one of those...
Well, it certainly doesn't have that many. It has like between all of its coverage moves that it can run, a grand total of 2 counters that just aren't really splashable by any means of the word. Like, one of them is Cresselia, which, in order to make Cresselia work, you gotta play like a full-on stall team. But of course, Verlis doesn't know that because he doesn't really understand 6v6 singles. And the other is Megalodios, a little bit more splashable, but still very limited to those really balancy styles that Landorus just loves eating up in general.
Pokemon that can be perfectly played around. So there's that. And then I was going and looking at some other things. So this is Pokemon Global Link, but...
Okay, stop. Just... What does this have to do with the Smogon metagame? These are this is battle spot stats. Tell me, we got a Blaziken right here, and you got an Aegislash here. How does this represent the Smogon metagame at all? How are these usage stats relevant to the Smogon metagame? Landorus Therian is not broken. If anything, it helps the metagame. It's a blanket check. That's what people use it for. It's a nice, Choice Scarf revenge killer. It's not something that completely limits team building. And, you can use anything over Landorus Therian. People are using Garchomp Nowadays they're using in the past few months people have been discovering Tank Chomp, which is in some cases better than Landorus-T. Like, yeah, Landorus-T is really splashable, but so is Landorus-I. Like, you see this thing all the time in high tournament play, which he of course has no mention or knowledge of. All he's doing is like later on he's gonna mention like ladder usage stats, which like usage does not equal centralizing. This is the point he tries to make later on, and I'm gonna bring up. I probably shouldn't have brought it up so early in the video because I'm gonna end up repeating myself. But okay.
I'm just kind of giving some comparison points for Landorus-T.
I just don't understand why he like. Does he think there's a link between what people in BattleSpot use and what people in Smogon use?
For BattleSpot, fifth most used Pokemon. Out of all of
especially
the,
considering the fact that BattleSpot doesn't support a 6v6 format at all.
Also, if we go and look at usage stats
like it's bad enough that he's relying solely on ladder usage stats in order to prove his points, but he uses them from like this is like October of 2014
for like a year.
And like, yeah, he says like they're not really relevant because it's before ORAS, even though Landorus has been a threat since before ORAS, well before. So then why are you showing us this, Verlis? Why?
Landorus is all the way, let's see.
Oh yeah, he mentions how Landorus-I is all the way. You know why that is? Because ladder players tend to be some freaking garbage. Especially back in October. Like, there was a time when Thundurus Incarnate was like down in the 40s, like threatening to go below the underused line. And Thundurus is a freaking amazing Pokemon. And afterwards, of course, we realized how amazing it was, and it's definitely like a top 3 Pokemon. Well, back in the day, now it's like top 10 pretty easily. So this point about like the usage stats is completely moot. Completely.
Combined usage for OU. Landorus-T, 23%. Landorus.
So look, it's bad enough that he doesn't think that Landorus-I is at least suspectable. He actually wants a ban for Landorus-T, or he wouldn't, or he thinks that it's worth a suspect test. That's even worse because it's completely not.
Landorus Incarnate has only gone up because of this. Now I'm gonna get back to what I've been saying for well over a year now. Smogon's just either ban happy mentality and their what is it?
Oh, ban happy mentality.
That
we haven't heard this
This
before.
is strong, and then it just kind of follows down, and there's a mob mentality effect of this is strong.
Mob mentality, and he's gonna talk about like flavor of the month. So what about the one time that we did actually identify a flavor of the month Pokemon? A Pokemon that was strong in its heyday. Well, it's still strong now. I'm talking about Mega Metagross. What was your video then, Verlis? I'm still waiting for it. You're not gonna give us any credit for not banning a suspect for once, and I think they made the right decision. I voted not to ban Mega Metagross because like it was like around the time of SPL. It was just kind of a flavor of the month. The meta did adjust, and we recognize that as a community. Landorus-I has been broken for like since X and Y, since it got unbanned in the 6th generation because it was banned in 5th generation for very similar reasons. So yeah, I don't know what you're talking about when he's talking about like this ban happy mentality or like mob mentality. When we just recently, like, we've proven as a community that we don't just ban everything. And certainly a lot of top players, you know, I actually did kind of a failed smallcast with a group of tournament players on Metagross-I, and they all wanted, a lot of them wanted it banned. But we just kind of put our foot down and said, no, we can adjust to this. This isn't outright broken. And as time went on, we were right. At least I think the decision was right. Mega Metagross is no longer as overwhelming. It's like up there with like Mega Altaria probably is on par with Mega Metagross now, and neither of them are really suspect worthy. So, but of course no mention for that because Verlis doesn't want to give us any credit for anything.
They're looking for counters,
and then he talks about how we're biased.
Not that strong of a Pokemon.
Apparently.
All of a sudden everything just becomes a flavor of the month. Greninja, suddenly a flavor of the month, let's ban it. Lucario, suddenly flavor of the month.
Oh
and then like all these other Pokemon, they've been wanting to be banned because it's a flavor of
he
the month.
acts like these suspects are only broken during the time period in which the suspect did. Like there wasn't a reason why the council has chosen these Pokemon. No, it's because they've been threats long before that.
But then we just get into this
and we can't just suspect everything that's a threat at once. We gotta do it one at a time.
Instead of encouraging people to just change their mentality
and develop the metagame.
Not play it, you know, just try to not produce some toxicity by just spamming things that people are upset with. But instead, it's just easier to ban it to Smogon. And then we see some other things like this, where they're just ignoring threats. That if I could
How are they ignoring threats? Landorus-I is the threat.
To have to say one Pokemon would be banned, and let's say battle spot rules ban a Pokemon, I would say Landorus because okay, I'm already.
This is so rich, so full of hypocrisy. Earlier on in the video, he says like, "Yeah, we just ban whatever we want." Isn't that exactly what you're advocating for right here? You just want to ban Landorus because it's used a lot? Like, sure, there's a reason it's used a lot. It's a very good Pokemon, but is it broken? No. Does it crush any individual playstyle? I guess you could argue offense, but no, not really. It's very easy to adjust to, and it's mostly just used as a blanket check, as a utility Pokemon. It doesn't even meet the defensive criteria for an Uber. It doesn't wall a majority of the metagame. No. It's very easy to prepare for, whereas Landorus-I is just kind of not as easy. You have to prepare Pokemon specifically for, and even then you can lose out to a coverage move unless you're using one of its two specific, really hard to use counters. Well, not really hard to use, just not splashable. You can't just stick Cresselia onto offense because you're weak to Landorus-I. That's completely ridiculous. But more from Verlis.
I've already made my statements, so I don't care about Mega Mole, I don't care about Mega Kingscon. Mega Pokemon,
of course you don't.
They're supposed to be stronger, so I don't think they should be.
Please, Verlis, don't make me
bans.
make more videos on
Greninja,
why you're wrong about those
Greninja
suspects as well.
Isn't strong enough to be banned, honestly. And then we look at Landorus-Therian. This Pokemon is probably just one of the most frustratingly reliable Pokemon to play with. And I think that that's why it has so much usage. It's a super
Yeah, he's gonna
easy
talk about how
Pokemon to play.
Landorus-T is
No
annoying.
skill to play
Really,
Landorus.
we can't
You
ban
bring it in,
Landorus-I
you
because
have
it's
Scarf, or
stupid
you bring it
strong
in as a tank
and has
with
like
Stealth
2
Rock,
counters,
and then you
but
just
you want to
blow
ban
up Pokemon.
Landorus-T
Actually,
because it
doesn't blow up
annoys
Pokemon.
you.
It's more just a frustrating, safe Pokemon. They can bring it in on almost anything. And
So
then
we
you can
can't
just
ban
kind of
stuff
play
because it's
around
too
your
strong,
opponent
but
and
you
just
can ban
be
stuff because
frustrating
it's
with
too
it.
safe.
So that's why. I
Isn't
feel
that
like
just
Landorus-T, but
convenient?
At the same time, it can bring Scarf. It can bring Speed Threat. It can bring. Some
And it's just
KO
this
threat. I
whole
don't even think
assumption
it
that we
relies on
can't
KO
ban
as much
something
as
unless it's
disruption.
number
And then
one
there's Landorus
usage.
Incarnate.
And it's not like Landorus is centralizing at all. I don't
Scary
prepare
things that I've
Pokemon
seen.
specifically for
Okay, so I
Landorus-T.
brought up a moveset thing
just
on
because it's number one in
Landorus.
usage.
Yeah, we have Landorus Incarnate.
I mean, that
right
just
here.
kind of comes naturally to have like a,
All-out
water
attacker,
type, something with an
Calm
ice
Mind, pretty
move.
much has a 30% chance of missing. So I mean, even that's not super reliable. Psychic, Earth Power, Hidden Power, Ice. Sometimes you see not well. So I mean, this Pokemon has counters right here. It even admits checks and counters.
Well, just
Specifically,
because a
both
Pokemon has
Sully and
counters
Megalodion
doesn't
Scare
mean
completely counter Landorus.
it's not
Pokemon
broken,
can
you know.
sponge
Mega
up its face and
Kangaskhan
triple it.
had
Boom,
counters,
just
I think.
completely done. And that's
I think
the
like
way Landorus right there. Also has its
Cofagrigus
counter
was like
check.
considered a hard
Mega
check,
Sableye can Calm Mind knock off it, and then
and
the
even then
problem
it was
is,
banned. Like
you-
that. Okay, that's an
here's
extreme
the- here's how the
example.
situation goes.
Landorus-I is certainly
Sack
not
up
as
Pokemon,
broken as
you
Mega
bring in
Kangaskhan.
Mega Sableye, and now you're
But
setting up Calm Minds.
Just because a
You either
Pokemon
switch
has
out, and now
switches
your
doesn't
Mega
mean it's
Sableye is
unhealthy,
the thing that's
or doesn't mean that
checking
it's
it,
not
making you
unhealthy.
get a super setup going. And then they lose advantage, like pretty much like I said earlier. Landorus Incarnate.
Yeah, I don't think Verlis has been watching a lot of like high level tournament play
but it can be checked.
lately.
It's going to be a revenge Pokemon, which means that balanced
Yeah,
offensive teams
checks.
do well against it.
And
again,
if you stay in on a
already-
check
your
to
opponent's already minus
Landorus-I,
one.
but
Why
you
is
still
bringing
need
a
it, you're
Pokemon
just
that needs
not a
to
good
get a
player.
KO a bad thing?
Like,
And if
yeah,
you have, like, really fast
technically
Pokemon on
banded
the team,
Talonflame's
Landorus
a
is
check to
So,
Landorus-I.
I really
But who in their right
don't
minds would ever
get it. It's
stay
not like
in?
Greninja that has no counters. It has a set moveset. It can't really run too many variations of it.
Again,
gets
it's just
through,
Verlis thinking
just-
very
it doesn't
superficially
happen. I feel like
on
the
the
problem is
surface. I
Landorus
feel like
Therian,
he's just
everyone
lost his
makes the joke
ability
like,
to
haha,
think
Smogon
critically
Talonflame.
at this
Yo,
point
Landorus
in order to
Therian
confirm
is
his own
the Smogon
biases,
Pokemon.
and then talk about how
Anything
we're
that, like,
biased
threatens it, you know, we look
for,
at
you know,
Greninja.
making
Greninja is really
arguably
crowding
the
out
good
Landorus
decision
Therian,
here.
Landorus Incarnate. So technically, you know, in this situation, it's showing that Greninja is not really centralizing. The problem is people centralize themselves. But they stick
What?
to one
I don't know what
Pokemon,
he's even
they
talking
bump
about
up
at this
its
point.
usage.
So basically, he's trying to say that because Smogon loves its Landorus-T so much that we ban Greninja because of that, which is completely stupid. And because even like obviously he doesn't really follow Smogon tournaments, but if he did, he'd know that. If anything, I'd argue that Garchomp has kind of taken Landorus-T's place. Not that Landorus-T isn't good anymore, or it's not good in high level play. It certainly is, but he's really just overhyping it more than it's actually used in high level play. Maybe it's used a lot on the ladder, but slowly the ladder has just lost its relevance as a measure. No, I shouldn't say that, but you shouldn't be using those usage stats as your sole points for why a Pokemon isn't centralizing or is. Just because Rotom Wash was like at the same kind of usage, like early X and Y, does that mean it was centralizing? No, not really. It was just used just as Landorus-T was, as a blanket check. It was as a response to the threat. It isn't the threat. So, yeah. I said this in the last video. I wonder if Verlis, like, does he watch what he's saying after he records it? I think, like I can't believe Verlis is so daft to where even he doesn't really notice the way he contradicts himself. But nevertheless, let's keep going.
Its usage because it's a flavor of the month, and then they ban instead of innovate, and that just shows right here that they're taking the Pokemon that isn't even a threat just to keep their prized Pokemon that they're never going to say X Pokemon is.
What are you talking about?
Really like it, like Landorus Therian and just embodies what Smogon is. Entry hazard, bulk switch, play around Pokemon that takes no skill to use.
Okay, that was just low. And like, wait, you're gonna say Landorus-T is something that takes skill to use? Like, I might have talked over it, but earlier in this video, I hate to do this, but I'm actually just gonna leave a link in the description because you do need to watch this video if anything for a good laugh. He says that Swagger shouldn't have been banned. He actually defends Swagger. I need to find it. Hold on.
Swagger getting banned and Baton Pass getting banned. These are the biggest of the biggest.
Listen to what he says here.
Swagger has existed for a long time. Prankster Swagger was back in 5th generation. Baton Pass back in 5th generation. But then we just get into this comfort play where people are like, everyone's spamming this now. We might as well just ban it instead of encouraging people to just change their mentality.
Do you see what he just said there? Everyone spams it, so let's just... Isn't that what he's saying with Landorus-T? That's basically the point that he's trying to make. Hey, look, it's #1 in usage for like half a year. Everyone spams it. Let's ban it. Is that not his logic? And then he just goes back and says, like, that's why we shouldn't have banned another thing. I don't... I'm just... How do you take this guy... How does anybody take this guy seriously when it comes to competitive mons? So Landorus-T doesn't require skill to use, but Swagger does, and it should be unbanned. And Baton Pass takes... Okay, well, I'm a little bit more split on Baton Pass as a whole, but like full chain Baton Pass that we used to allow, that takes a lot of skill. God, this... Oh my god, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and go back to like the end of the video where we were before, but just kind of, just one example of why you shouldn't listen to this guy for anything that involves competitive Pokemon, and certainly not Smogon competitive Pokemon, considering he brought up the freaking battle spot stats earlier. That has like nothing to do with anything. Completely different metagame.
Greninja is not really centralizing. The problem is people centralize themselves. But they stick to
I love that quote. This makes like zero sense whatsoever. So we centralize ourselves because we like ban things that can kill Landorus-T. Like there's not a gazillion things that can kill a Landorus-T.
Just to keep their prized Pokemon that they're never going to say X Pokemon is busted when they really like it. Like
I take back what I said at the beginning. I said this wasn't as bad as the last video, but it definitely is. Now that I'm like going through it for a second time.
That's just so basic right there, and I don't get how Pokemon that get less usage than it are called centralizing. Like if you want centralizing, 35%, that's central.
So, okay, I'm sorry if you can hear that in the laughing in the background, but so he's saying, okay, this Landorus-T has 35% usage, so it's centralizing. So no, usage does not equal centralization. It's not the centralizing force. It's a response to the other centralizing forces. You know, Mega Metagross, to an extent Mega Altaria. What else off the top of my head? I'm trying to think like what else is in S rank, A+ rank. Mega Charizard X. Back in the day, Mega Tyranitar was really good, and Landorus-T was one of its checks. And it was probably used just as much back then too. So what I'm trying to say, this is the guy who probably would argue that Rotom Wash was centralizing in the XY era because it was used highly. Like, no, yeah, Rotom Wash was used a lot, but that wasn't that's not the source of centralization. The source of centralization is power, and that's exactly what Landorus-I was. This, like, regardless of whether it was used in Battle Spot or not, or whether it was used back in like October when people didn't realize just how busted it was. And trust me, even back then where it was like 30 something on the ladder in usage, you bet your ass that the high level tournament players, they knew it was broken. They knew it was really, really good. Just the fact that this guy thinks that Landorus-T is this big offensive threat. It's really not. It's not even really a defensive centralizing force either. It has no reliable recovery. Everyone packs like a water type nowadays, like either a Manaphy or a Keldeo. All it does, like on a defensive set, is just, blanket check, which is what it's supposed to do and why it's used so much, especially on the ladder. I don't see how that's centralizing or a threat at all or anything ban worthy. Just because it annoys you, and because it's funny, because that's exactly the same argument he turns against Smogon, is, oh, this thing is spammed on the ladder, this thing is used a lot, or they ban it just because they don't like it. That's exactly what you're doing right now, what you're advocating for. It's banning Landorus-T because you don't like it. And that's the only grounds you have. I hate to be so harsh because, like, I know it's good to keep a professional attitude, but no, this guy's a joke. He's wrong about so many things in this video. He obviously doesn't have very much experience with Landorus-I, and I'm just gonna restart this and pause it so I don't end up on another one of his videos. Obviously doesn't have a lot of experience with Landorus-I. The reason it was banned is because, like, he mentioned something about how, like, it's 101 speed, easily fixed by Rock Polish. Rock Polish sets obliterates most offense teams after some stealth rocks. Easy. Stall? Call mine. Go on. Yeah, it's too... He's talking about how, like, Landorus-T is suddenly more versatile than Landorus-I. Complete bullshit. Like, he brings up the stats where it says, like the third option is choice ban. Like, nobody uses that. Double dance is not a centralizing force. It's really hard to set up, and certainly not as threatening. And like, the stats can be deceiving, but Landorus-I is actually a lot more powerful than Landorus-T because of sheer force. Pretty much just has two sets, which is like choice scarf and defensive, whereas Landorus-I has, like, well, first of all, okay, there's Life Orb Attacker, which is the best one. Calm Mind, Rock Polish. You can even run, like, different coverage moves on the first set, so you can run stuff like Rock Slide for Spadef Talonflame. You can run Knockoff for Lotties, even Cresselia. You can run U-Turn. Like, there's so many options. If anything, just a lot of variations of one set that makes it so threatening and hard to play around, really. And on top of that, the power of sheer force against balance, and it's relatively good speed tier. Like, 101 is not really that slow. That's pretty fast. Sure, there's a lot of other things that are faster, but 101 is pretty dang good still. And it's so overwhelming. It's too well-rounded. It's got a lot of power behind it. And which makes for an overall ridiculous Pokemon. And I apologize for not being able to make more sophisticated arguments, but I did make a couple posts on the actual forums, and that's where you should look to for more sophisticated, in-depth discussion on Landorus-I and its banning. What I covered here was just, correcting Verlis and giving more or less a surface level understanding of Landorus-I. So if you want, like, more in-depth explanations, I'm going to link a few posts from the suspect thread that I made in the description below, as well as the thread overall. So make sure to check that out, and I'll see you all next time.